So let me give just a couple of insights to kind of feed into the panel today. There's two of us that are going to talk first, and then we've got three other people, or two other people, I think that'll join, and I think we'll have, with Charles facilitating, some robust discussion. The perspectives I want to share really come from having spent the last almost 10 years outside of the US and outside of the commercial sector, focused on developing markets, as Charles pointed out. And I think that there are some tremendous opportunities, but as Charles said, in some cases, I don't know why we're getting feedback. In some cases, technology is not our friend. And as Charles said, sometimes you pull out a map book when you need a map. And I would just say that when I left Microsoft, I was given advice by the then chairman of Microsoft, and now the co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He said, leave your rich world thinking behind and get out of the US and come back in 3 years before you start to think you can have insights on what would be useful for the poor. So being a pretty good employee, I did that. And I just want to caution us that velocity of technology is exciting. It is cool. It is powerful. It is changing many things. But let's not confuse velocity with progress. And let me just ground us. So would we say that the US has high penetration of smartphones? Generally? Yeah? So is poverty in the United States going up or down? Are education rates at high school going up or down? So with all the exciting things that we could talk about, let us just ground ourselves in understanding what the social human impact is. And this is kind of the perspective I want to share with you. That when we look at the $2.5 billion, as Charles points out, we definitely, at the foundation, are interested in what you're talking about. We are desperately interested in the economics of payment systems. We're interested in the plethora of devices, particularly mobile phones. And not that it's a big topic for today, but we're most excited about feature phones. Why? How many of you could go a week without charging your smartphone? Raise your hand. You could go a week without charging. That's because you don't use it? No. Smartphones are awesome. And we've got smartphones at the foundation that we're testing, $20 smartphones, the Mozilla OS. Has anybody seen the Mozilla OS smartphone? It's awesome. $20, getting cheaper, to the point where they're going to be negligible. These are good things. Charles talked about GPS not being available where we live and work. Electricity is hard to come by where we live and work. So when we think about the velocity of technology, if the future of payments is smartphone, then we have to leave behind a lot of the 2.5 billion people that we're here to serve. So we can't leave them behind. So we have to put this into context. That doesn't mean that we're not interested in it and actually quite enthused by it. But I just want to provide a context, because what we have to solve for is the bottom quintile, or the quintile up. So take the two bottom quintiles, 40%. And in a lot of cases, what we're talking about today, which is cool, which is good actually, is what happens when you start at the top and work down. How much market is there for people that are in the businesses that you're in? And the answer is, there's a huge market, huge market. We're coming at it from the bottom up. In some cases, the strategies can be really powerful and synergistic. In some cases, they might not be. So from the foundation's perspective, we look at the technology that's possible as a huge opportunity. A couple things that I would point out. First, the economics of digital are by far the transformative agent here. Digital payments allow the compression of cost in a huge way. and it shall be so also for the bottom of the pyramid, for quintiles 5 and 4. Digital is huge. When we studied about 40 markets in the last 2 years to look at what are the costs, what are the actual costs involved with digital payments, the ability to compress cost, not price, the ability to compress cost to less than a penny per transaction is not only achievable, it's done routinely. That's a huge thing. Our point of view at the foundation is how can we get things down to the absolute lowest cost possible, and then you can work from there in terms of value-added services and other things in order to achieve high penetration through distribution, etc. So digital makes it possible. There's some other attributes around digital and payments that I think many in the room are much more expert than I, that we also found to be true. And that is when you look at the way prices are delivered, or the price of products, in a lot of cases, risk of payment, risk of settlement, risk of clearing, is something that the industry over 50 years, and many of you in the room have a lot of experience with MasterCard and Visa, American Express, and others, and over the years, you have very, very good models for how to manage risk and how to actually price that in. And in markets like the US and Japan and others, it was easy to accommodate that price. What drives the risk is also something that digital technology can really help us with. So again, when we study markets across the world, what drives down risk? Prepaid accounts, so debit, immediate funds transfer. So now, we don't have a risk if in fact I can clear and settle while we're eye to eye. So now, do you get the opportunity to take that price out? And if you're an incumbent that is profiting hugely from those prices, the answer is you do it very slowly. So, but you can do it. And we see markets where they're doing just that. So that's one dynamic that I would share with you, is digital and reducing risk can really, really have a big impact on cost, and in a market structure can also have an impact on price. The second thing that I think is interesting, and I've just got 3 points to make. The second point is these digital platforms that we're talking about are not complex, and they're not hard. Those that have them would like you to think they are, largely because that's the mystique, whether it's Square or PayPal or what have you. But the actual technology that allows you to do digital payments, push, immediate funds transfer, straight through processing, these are not complex platforms. They're important. They need to be industrial strength. And we have many examples of them that are actually in place, whether it's Equins and Nets in the Scandinavian countries and Nordic countries, whether it's SPAY in Mexico or Interac in Canada, Egypt and MasterCard, or Egypt and Turkey working with MasterCard and others. You actually can implement these platforms quite cost effectively, which we think is very, very exciting. The third point, though, which is what the last session really looked at, was these markets are very fragmented. There's a fragmentation, in particular, in sub-Saharan Africa, where we spend a lot of our time, as well as Southeast Asia. The markets are fragmented. The offerers, or the providers of mobile money services, are largely providing on us closed-loop, walled garden models. So that's not a bad thing generally, because if you're a provider and you're doing okay, that's awesome. It's hard if you want to reach a lot of poor people, because now if I'm the World Food Program and I want to distribute, let's go to Kenya, and I want to distribute payments to 300,000 people a month, and I don't want to have to worry whether they have an M-Pesa account or not. In Kenya, we know a lot of people will have M-Pesa, but not everybody. I also don't want to shuttle you to one bank There are some good banks that are doing this work, but if you don't happen to have that bank, what about you? So people that are involved in development, like the World Food Program, like UNICEF, like the WHO, like the World Bank, like USAID, DFID, JICA, DANITA, etc., they don't want to have to say, oh, that's right, that's an M-Pesa deal, so I have to do it this way. You actually can't do bulk payments through M-Pesa. You can do P2P, but as long as it's on M-Pesa. But you can't do bulk payments. So these closed loop, walled gardens are really a major impediment, which leads me to my final point, and that is if digital platforms are so ubiquitous and they're not that hard to get, they're not that expensive, and the economics are extraordinary, the challenge that we're trying to solve at the foundation is then how can we make them available that affect the 2.5 billion people at the bottom of the pyramid. And so when we look around, we think, it must be something to do with the market. Technology's here, the costs are low. So when we look at the market, we come back to a discussion about then why are markets so fragmented? And how can we defragment those markets? Similar to what we did in vaccine development, similar to what we did in other technologies, where we were able to get the market alignment in such a way that it truly benefited the poor. So I think as we have our discussion today, I'll turn it back over to Charles to give to our next speaker, but I hope that we can explore that a little bit. Why do I say that? Because if we can do transactions for less than a penny, which you can do digitally in two-way transactions, if the poor can benefit from that, what you just heard on the previous panel, the rest of the world wants it too. So we see this in all kinds of technology innovations, and this is where the exciting part for me is, if we can solve for Africa and India, Indonesia and Bangladesh and Pakistan, there might be a reverse Big Bang that comes to New York versus from New York to the world. So, Charles, I'll hand it back to you.